Welcome, I'm Chef Deborah from Roca's Bakery at Greensboro, North Carolina, and today in my kitchen we are going to make a Blitz puff pastry dough. If you've seen my first episode, we did a Blitz Danish dough for the home baker so that you don't have to spend 2 days making Danish dough or puff pastry dough, and we'll also have a croissant dough later on. But we're doing puff pastry dough today, and out of this puff pastry we're going to make some beautiful vol au vent tarts, some other goodies, a baked brie and papillote, and some palmier cookies out of the puff pastry. So it's very easy to make, and we're going to go through the process today. So we've got 2 1/3 cup of regular flour, and to that we're going to add 2 tablespoons of cake flour. Now if you don't have cake flour, and don't go buy a big box of cake flour if you don't use it on a regular basis, just add a couple tablespoons more of regular flour, that will be fine. It's not a problem. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of salt, just regular table salt, and we're going to mix that up with our fingers. Now this is one of those recipes, like I say, we get our fingers dirty, we get our hands dirty because these are our best tools. So that's what we're going to do today. So we've got our dry ingredients mixed together. Now we have 1 cup of Pulgra butter, which is, or any European butter that you want to use, but don't use any of the Irish butters. They just don't work as well, so you want to get a European high-fat butter for this, and I found that Pulgra or even Land O'Lakes works best in this recipe. So we want to cut them up, cut the sticks up into little tiny cubes. So this would be 2 sticks. It looks like a lot of butter, but it's only 2 sticks of butter. But when it's cut up real small, it looks like it's a huge amount, but it's not. So we want it to be cold. We don't want this to get really warm so that it's going to be getting mushy. So we're going to go ahead and add 1/2 teaspoon of fresh lemon juice in a 1/2 cup of cold water. And the lemon juice, because it's an acid, it helps set the dough a little bit and helps it puff a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and just get our hands dirty and get right in there and make the dough. So you will need a rolling pin, and if you use a bench scraper, we'll go ahead and have that ready. So basically what we want to do is we want to toss the butter and break up the little clumps or the little cubes that we have of butter into the flour. Okay, so this bowl is a little bit too small. I didn't grab a big enough bowl because we're going to be tossing this flour everywhere. So I'm going to get a larger bowl here, and we're just going to transfer this. Make sure we have enough room to work with. And I think I said in a previous episode that my staff is always telling me I'm grabbing the smaller bowls and not the larger bowls. So we're going to do that today. But what we want to do is we just want to smash the butter like this. Now, as an alternative, you can pulse this butter in a food processor until it has large clumps, but we don't want it to be like sand. We don't want it to be fully incorporated, because the butter, when it bakes and when we fold and roll this, there's no yeast, there's no leavening agent in this, so the only thing that makes this raise or puff up, which is why it's called puff pastry, is the water evaporating out of the butter that creates steam. So that's the only leavening agent that we use in this. So we just kind of want to smash it and flatten it out, and we're coating the butter with the flour, and then we're going to make a really rough dough. If you saw my Danish episode, is a very, very similar process, except we're not using eggs and vanilla and milk. This is what we call a lean dough, which has no extra fat other than the butter and no leavening agents. So we want to be sure that it puffs really nice, because it is a puff, it's a Blitz dough. We can have this made and chilled in your home within a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours, and you can bake whatever you want to make with it, rather than waiting 2 days like we have to do in the bakery when we make a big butter blocks and make the dough separate. And so this is a Blitz dough that works really great. You're not going to necessarily get the same layering as we would in a regular puff dough, but for the home baker and for making something special, when you're limited in time, when you're busy with your kids and your family, you don't have time to do 2 days of doughs and turning and rolling and cooling and stuff. So That's about as much as I want to get it. So we still have big chunks of butter in here because that will get incorporated, and the butter has softened actually quite a bit because I took it right out of the refrigerator and it was cold. So the European butter is a lot softer because of the higher fat content. So it does, the more you handle it, the softer, quicker it gets soft, let's put it that way. So we're going to put our half a cup of water juice and our half a teaspoon of lemon juice in here, and we're just going to toss it to mix. You just bring your hands to the bottom of the bowl and toss it up like this. And then we're going to start forming a shaggy dough. And again, this is part of pastry, and if you're not used to getting your hands dirty, you have to love getting, not mind or love getting your hands dirty, because it's all about the dough here. Whatever we make from this dough is going to be wonderful, but the dough is the star. So we want to be sure that it's done well. So we're just going to bring this together as quick as we can without touching the butter too much and softening it too much. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and clean my fingers off here. Get this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got some flour here in my rolling pin, and we're just going to throw some flour down, and we're going to start forming this into a real rough rectangle shape like this. And as you can see now, it's really rough and it's shaggy, and that's exactly the way it's supposed to be. And we're just going to go ahead and lightly flour it, and we're going to lightly flour our rolling pin, and then just tap it. And as you can see, it's shaggy, and we're going to shore up the sides a little bit and roll a little bit more. And if you can see the big striations of butter through the dough, that's exactly what we want to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the top over. You can see how shaggy it still is, but it's not going to be that way. And then we're going to fold this over, and we're going to turn it 90 degrees. And we're going to make sure that we have enough flour underneath. And we're going to roll it again, just like we did before. And with each roll and fold, you'll see that the dough gets a little bit easier to handle. So if you feel that it's sticking a little to the counter, go ahead and flour it a little bit. And we're going to start rolling it sideways too, because we want to get it to about 18 inches long by about 6 to 7 inches wide. And you can still see the butter striations through it in here. And again, that's what we want to see. And we're going to go ahead and fold it over again and brush off the excess, and fold it over again and turn 90 degrees. And I'm going to stop for a second here, and I'm going to clean up the board and push this to the side so that small pieces of dough that have stuck there doesn't create a sticking point for the dough as we're rolling. So we're going to go ahead and do that. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and roll again. And as you can see, with each fold and roll, you can see how the texture of the dough is changing. Rolling pin is clean, and flour is a great cleaner agent when you're working with pastries, because take a little flour and roll it across your rolling pin and just scrape it right off. We're going to go ahead and roll it this way, and look how smooth the dough is getting now. So it's going to be a beautiful dough when we're done with it, but we want to be sure that we keep the sides shored up like this, so that we have even sides, that when we do our folding and rolling, that it's not turning at 90 degrees again. Everything is matching up. All the corners are matching up, the edges are matching up. It's really important that all of that matches up so that every little piece of dough gets laminated. So to explain what we're doing here, is a process called lamination, and it's creating, every roll and fold is creating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little layers of butter and flour, and it's called, actually the literal translation is called 1,000 leaves. So when you see puff pastry, like in turnovers, and you see how it's puffed up, and then when you bite into it, it shatters, or you see all these little puffy layers. That's why it's called 1,000 leaves. So that's what we're making today. We're making 1,000 leaves dough. I like to learn the history about food as I'm baking, because it makes a difference. So before it gets too warm, if the butter gets too warm, we're going to keep rolling and folding here. So that was our third roll and fold. Now there is a point where you can say, I've rolled too long, or I've done too many roll and folds. Sometimes we think that more is better. You know, in our society, you know, we're supersizing everything, but in the pastry world, it's not necessarily like that. So we really don't want to do more than 4 roll and folds, especially on these Blitz doughs, because it will overwork the dough. So we're going to shore up the sides, and we want to be sure that it's even, but you can see here that this is a little bit thinner than here. So we want to be sure that we're going to take this dough out from the center a little bit, make sure that it's not sticking, it's still moving on the counter, because we want it to also be the same thickness all the way across. So there we go, you can see the dough moving on the counter. That's what we want to see. So I'm not going to press too hard, and this dough is soft. It's not stiff like our regular puff pastry dough. It's a little bit softer dough. So we're going to roll it sideways a little bit just to thin it out. I'm going to take it this way a little bit more, and I think that'll do it for this roll and fold. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold it up in our what we call an envelope shape. Make sure that the layers are even here. I am a little bit OCD when it comes to getting everything lined up properly. But it shows in our end product. So this is what the dough should look like. It's a beautiful, smooth dough, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this in plastic wrap. Now you can put this in the cooler for a couple of hours and let it rest so that the gluten in the flour or the protein in the flour has a chance to relax, so it can roll out easier when we get to rolling out our product. And or you can pop it in the freezer, but check it about every 5 to 7 minutes because you don't want it to freeze. You just want it to get chilled. But I would recommend just keeping it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours. And so we're going to get this wrapped and cooled, and we'll come back and we're going to be making some of our wonderful pastry cream, and then we're going to be making some beautiful puff pastry treats from all of this that we're making today. So see you back in a little bit. So while our puff pastry dough is cooling in the refrigerator, we're going to go ahead and make our pastry cream. So today I've doubled the recipe, so we've got 4 cups of whole milk, we've got 10 egg yolks, we've got a couple tablespoons of vanilla bean paste, and that is to replace 2 vanilla bean pods. Sometimes they're hard to find at your local grocery store or even some of your gourmet markets. They can be pretty pricey, especially now, and vanilla bean paste is a great alternative to that. And then we've got a couple teaspoons of vanilla extract. We've got about 2.5 ounces of cornstarch, and that's lightweight, so it is a lot of cornstarch, but cornstarch is very light in weight. And as far as the sugar, we've got about 8 ounces of sugar here and 3 tablespoons of butter. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cornstarch and the sugar and mix it together. So we want to coat the cornstarch with the sugar so that everything emulsifies properly. So we've got a whip here, and we're just going to mix it up really well. And then we're going to add the egg yolks to this sugar cornstarch mixture. And we're going to set this aside while our milk is heating up on the stove with our vanilla. So we're just going to mix this all together, and it's going to form a thick paste. Cornstarch is our thickening agent for the pastry cream, and we're going to use this pastry cream to make a couple of wonderful things. And we're going to mix some of it with a chantilly cream, which is a sweetened whipped cream, and kind of making a hybrid dessert that I use in our bakery. Rather than making a diplomat cream or a mousseline cream, we're going to just do something a little bit different. So I added a couple of tablespoons extra of cornstarch to the recipe because I am mixing it with chantilly cream or the sweetened whipped cream, because when we mix the cream together with it, it thins it out a little bit, and I don't want it to be super thin because we're using this recipe in tarts. So I'm going to switch to the spatula here and just mix these yolks up and press them in together. It's easier to do than with a whisk. There we go. And so this is the texture that we're looking for in our egg yolks, and you can see the egg yolks are beautiful yellow color, and that's what we're looking for. So we're going to set this aside while the milk and the vanilla bean is heating up. So we're going to go over to the stove, and we're going to put our milk in the pot. Let me grab the vanilla bean and the vanilla bean paste, and the vanilla extract rather, and the butter. So we have it right over here. So we've got it ready. So we've got our milk in our pan. We're going to heat it up until it's bubbling around the edges. And we're going to go ahead and put in our vanilla bean paste and our vanilla extract. We're just going to wait and move it around a little bit. We don't have to stir it hard. We're not looking to beat the milk or anything like that. We just want to heat it up. That will take a couple of minutes at least. I've got it on medium heat. We don't want to turn it on high so that you're burning the milk, because you will taste that burned milk flavor in your end product. So we don't want that to happen. So this is one of those recipes where you have to be patient. Sometimes in baking we have to wait for the good stuff to happen. But I can smell the vanilla bean already, so it smells really good. I've had a lot of people, if I had to run to the store from the kitchen to our retail bakery store, and people used to tell me, you smell like butter and vanilla. Butter and vanilla. And I said, yep, that's our perfume as pastry chefs, butter and vanilla. One of the nice things about the sweet treats that we're going to be making from this pastry cream is that they can be enjoyed all year long, but they're fairly easy to make and they're beautiful when they turn out. We're going to be, in our next episode, we're going to be using our pastry dough and the pastry cream to make a little French tart called a voy au vent. And we're going to take some fresh fruit glazed in apricots, and we're going to put it on top of the pastry cream in this beautiful shell made out of our puff pastry dough. And I tell you, it is not hard to make, and it's absolutely beautiful. And you can impress your friends and family very easily with this dessert. And it's a great dessert to have in the summer. I tell you, when we have them in the bakery, they sell out usually within the first hour. And we make trays of them. So we're going to let that rest now. I think the vanilla bean is incorporated pretty well, and we're going to see if it's starting to bubble yet. This is one of those times when I wish we had smell-o-vision. You know, when we make caramel, when we do anything with chocolate, and of course vanilla, it just smells so great. So our milk has come to a boil, and we're going to transfer over to the other stovetop here so you can see what I'm doing easier. I'm going to go ahead and grab the butter and another bowl. I'm going to leave the stove on because we are going to be putting the bowl back on that burner in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a technique called tempering the eggs. So if we added the eggs and the cornstarch to this mixture, it would become curdled and scrambled, and you'd have a big scrambled egg mess. We're not going to do that. So we take about a quarter of a cup of hot milk, and we're going to stir it into the egg mixture, and it tempers the eggs. It gradually heats them up so it doesn't scramble them, because otherwise you would get these big clumps that will never come out of your pastry cream, and you definitely do not want that. You'll have to start over. There's no way you can salvage that. And sometimes, you know, if I'm by myself, or which this is a one-person job, because you don't want your kids to help you with this recipe because it is hot milk, I put a wet towel or one of those non-stick pads you have in your kitchen so that you can do this effectively by yourself without the bowl moving. So you can stir and pour at the same time. That helps me a lot in the bakery kitchen because I do it all the time. And so when we put our little second amount in, it'll be safe to pour this back into the hot milk mixture, and then we're going to put it back on the stove to cook for about 2 to 3 more minutes until it's nice and thick. And then we're going to strain it and add our butter. I tell you this, you know, I say the glaze is the nectar of the bakery. Pastry cream, this is one of those things you can eat with a spoon. It's just wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and just gently mix it together, and it turns a pale yellow color. And I tell you, if you could smell this now, it's just the vanilla and the eggs is just a wonderful, wonderful smell. So we're going to quick put this back on the heat. And we're going to let it cook for 2 to 3 minutes until it's nice and thick. And then we're going to put it on the other counter. We're going to strain it and add our butter. So we've got our pastry cream that's been cooked on the stove until it's nice and thick, and as you can see it's really thick, and that's what we want to see, because when it's cold it's going to get a little bit thicker, and then we'll be adding some chantilly cream to it, or the sweetened whipped cream. But right now we're going to add our butter and just stir it until it melts into the pastry cream, and this gives not only a richness to the pastry cream, but it gives it a nice glossy shine to it. So you don't want to skip this step, otherwise it will be dull, like you saw when I just lifted the whip up. So you want it to be nice and shiny, because some people eat it like this as vanilla pudding. Now, if you're making our Voyavent pastry tart shells from our Puff Pastry, and you want to use instant vanilla pudding, you can certainly do that if you don't want to make fresh pastry cream, but it really takes, 20 minutes from beginning to end to make a single batch of pastry cream, and it is well worth the 20 minutes of time in the ingredients that you have to make it, because the flavor, you just can't even begin to compare the flavor. And so many bakers or home bakers now use the instant cream because they don't know how to make the pastry cream. And there is a huge difference. Let me switch this around because I'm a lefty. There's a lot of lefties in the world. My dad used to tell me that the most intelligent kids were left-handed. And I think he was trying to make me feel better because the teachers would always try and tell me I had to use my right hand to do everything, and I couldn't do it. So we're just going to take this and we're going to push this through a sieve, and this is to get any little traces of egg that might not have incorporated well into the pastry cream, or any little solid bits for some reason that that didn't cook down because we added cornstarch with the sugar. So we finished pressing our pastry cream through the sieve, and now we have a wonderful silky, very thick pastry cream, which is exactly what we want to see. So we're going to put this in an ice bath in a larger bowl with water and ice cubes, and we're going to cover this with plastic wrap, and we want to stick it to so it's touching the pastry cream, the very top of the pastry cream, so that it doesn't form a skin. And if you've ever made hot chocolate either in the microwave or on the stovetop, and you let it sit for a few minutes, you'll come back and you'll see a skin has formed, and you have to actually take a spoon and take it off and throw it away. And this pastry cream will do the exact same thing. So we don't want that in our beautiful pastry cream. So we will go ahead and get that done and put it in the cooler. And in our next episode, we're going to make our beautiful Voyavent fruit tarts using our puff pastry that we made today and the pastry cream that we've made in this episode. So join us in our next episode with Chef Deborah Walker from Roca's Bakery in Greensboro, North Carolina. See you then.